Hey all, welcome to the
No,
Trampled.
I haven't seen the Muffin Man, and I've never been to Drury Lane. Your next question, please, counselor.
I don't know what that means.
You don't?
No, the Muffin Man.
Have you seen the Muffin Man?
No,
The Muffin who lives on Drury Lane?
is that a thing?
It's an old
Like,
nursery rhyme.
I honestly don't know that.
It's an old nursery. Have you seen the Muffin Man? The Muffin Man? The Muffin Man?
Okay, I've heard the
Haven't you
melody.
watched Shrek? Come on, boy.
I have. I've watched Shrek, but is it from Shrek?
Well, it's not from Shrek. It's an old nursery rhyme kid song.
If I wouldn't have asked and you wouldn't have said, I wouldn't have known what the heck that meant.
Dude, I have a YouTube channel for you. The channel is called The Resurrectionists. And what they do is they go through old nursery rhymes and tales from like the Brothers Grimm and things like that. And they track it back to its root. What did it actually mean? What was the origin story of three blind mice? And who were the three blind mice? It was all allegorical and what have you. But I mean, some of these are pretty dark subjects that they get into. The YouTube channel is called The Resurrectionists, and I'll put a link to it over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page. It's a good channel. They got some interesting videos, and if you like a little bit of the macabre from history and maybe some dark themes, that's a channel to watch.
I've been watching lately. I mean, not every day, but I ran across it. I dipped my toe into it and said, okay, maybe some future time I'll revisit it to explore more. But
Uh-huh.
whatever it is you're doing at the time takes up your focus, but you see things
Yeah.
that are likewise grabby of your attention, and
Mhm.
but you can't work with it at the moment. But
Yeah. Gee,
there's
does that happen?
that happens all the time, right?
Yeah, with me it does.
Because there's a bunch of stuff that's cool, but we can't really tackle everything at the same time.
No.
And we're focused on whatever the heck we're focused on, and so it's like, but I saw this channel where what they are um I guess they're searchers of truth, you know.
Mhm.
And I do it in quotes because I'm thinking it to myself that we all have a certain amount of bias that hinders certain things and stuff. But whatever. And I shouldn't do that for the channel because they're making an effort to study, um, for instance, ancient origins of where biblical, be it Judaism or Christianity, like previous to that, what associations occurred in history, what records are left in history
Yeah.
previous, like in the rumbling in the crumbled ashes of one place where tablets exist and stuff across
Yeah.
the world. And so they go to the origin of the things that people believe at the time. And so one of the things that they've mentioned and that I saw and that I took note of,
Mhm.
um, was that there was a precursor to Judaism,
Okay. Yeah.
and it was called Yahwehism.
Mhm.
But in this precursor to, and there's all sorts of um a lot of the places that they, because there's all sorts of things happening
Sure.
when you talk about things of the past, like, missing information, this and that.
Yeah.
They have found a lot of places and a lot of mentions
Mhm.
of a people that were called Jewish people or Hebrews
Yeah.
that exited one place or that settled in what, like, they found
Mhm.
references in ancient stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not like it doesn't, but there's whole groups of people that are like, yeah, well, it's not in, and I understand it's enough to the level that it's enough, and it's not enough to the level that maybe you want to stretch and whatever. I get that, but within context, there's stuff from ancient times sitting there
Sure.
that has mentions, so it's not like it's just, you know fantasy Mickey Mouse land.
Right.
But anyways, but they get into this whole thing of Yahwehism and stuff and what they practice,
Mhm.
and like the different gods, and then they try to make associations. That's where they well, you have to be careful because you can't assume so much from sometime,
Right.
just millennia and then some ago. But um they it's very interesting. It's very interesting because we're
Yeah.
sitting here in 2024, and people that look into such things much more professionally by a long shot, um, have these arguments of what exactly, how does this place, or how does this phrase place in
Hmm.
context, and what were the people, was the, and so, and we've talked about this slightly in the past or a few times, but when you try to, it's never as good as when you're there, which is kind of a theme of what we
Obviously.
were talking, right? Because when you're there, and
Yeah.
you, but if you're there, you also miss out. Like for instance, you and I and the rest of us are here in our respective little areas and stuff, and we're part of a culture and part of an area, but we don't look at it like if we're looking at hieroglyphics or this or that. But people in the future,
Right.
although we have plenty of technology, and so recording devices so maybe all that stuff will just forward.
Well, but who knows? I mean, because how much of the technology that we're using today is going to be obsolete in 5 years, let alone 500?
Yeah,
I mean, if you went back 10 years, half of what we're using now didn't exist, or it
I
was
can't
just in somebody's head.
I can't even play my VHS tapes currently. I know I could get a little thing to do it, but like little things like that, where your old media starts to not be
Yeah.
able to be transposed,
Yeah.
and if you let that happen for a century or two, then there's nothing to play
Well,
back the stuff from the past.
I'm sitting here laughing because I'm sitting right next to two VCRs. One of them I'm using to record video into the computer, and the other's a backup in case this one dies. I bought two VCRs for $5 each at a thrift shop so I could get some of our tapes in there.
But it's like
So,
if people today,
but
like you and I, and the rest of us, we're living our lives, so we know the key moments in terms of the things that are important or this or that. And I guess, but we have certain little news of the day, sort of informed kind of
sure.
things that are important. But like if you stretch it out in the future, people then, the little nuances that we have amongst us, and the walls that we have for clearer thinking from our vantage point is also not easily available to us now.
Well, but we don't even have to go that far because so much is done electronically. We have relied basically on things that were carved in stone. We can go back several hundred years on parchment and paper, but how much of current modern history right now, stuff that happens today, is actually being written down on anything physical that you could pick up and hold in your hand? And you don't need to plug into a wall. You know, I've got totes full of photographs that I'm slowly scanning and collating and organizing and this, that, and the other so I can, pass them around to the people in the family who have some sort of connection with these people. And some of them are going to be going to the uh, genealogy museum here locally. But I haven't taken a on paper photograph in 30 years. So there's a 30-year gap where there's nothing. There's no history if it isn't online, you know? And I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I just want to parse out what I was, the point that I was making, which is within this
Mm-hmm.
world that you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
or that we're talking about, but not necessarily this angle of current media and media in the future or past media, and that the issue of that separation where things
Mm-hmm.
become so. I'm not necessarily, although this is part of the conversation, but I just want to
Okay,
frame
go
what I
for it.
was. Okay, I wanted to frame what I was trying to get at, trying to nutshell it here, is that for us, you and I and everybody here living in current world America and whatever beyond, but like let's say here America, um, we know what's what currently, as
Mhm.
far as we know, but we don't have a bird's eye view of us
No.
necessarily. And to attach it to what I'm trying to make a reference point, people back in the day, let's say Phoenician times,
Mhm.
when they were sailing up and down the Mediterranean and doing trade with all these little
Mhm.
pueblos along the coastlines, and maybe setting up shop there and this and that. They didn't, they were just living it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They and sure, they wrote stuff down, of course, but like it was all practical stuff. Hey, two canisters
But
of
that's we know
beeswax.
so much. But that's how we know so much about them.
Right. But I'm saying from their vantage point and their perception of their world around them.
Right. They weren't writing history. They were dealing with today. Yeah.
Right, but let me go the step further. For them, our view of them
Mhm.
is a long lens looking at all the materials and
Right.
this, but we're not on the ground in their slippers,
Right.
and for them, they couldn't have possibly
Well,
imagined what they would have looked like to people in the future necessarily. They
and
wouldn't have imagined it.
and that's where we get into that speculation that you were talking about, because a good percentage of the history that we perceive past a certain time. I mean, you can document certain things for a time, but you get back into areas, even the Roman Empire, a good percentage of it is speculation. We know people, we know dates. We don't know what they ate on a Thursday in October.
Well, but
We
we
can
do.
speculate.
No,
We
that's
know
a good.
what they would have had available, but it's kind of related to what you're saying. There are no boots on the ground. We can only speculate.
Yeah, well, just but so we got to be careful. Just we don't know in a town of 30 to 40 to 100,000 people during Roman times
Mhm.
what each family and each dwelling and their ancestry and their occupations we don't know that, but what we do know is whoever they have
Mhm.
recorded what they did
Right.
for a living, where they came from, many times relocated,
Right.
and what they ate.
So well, that's what I'm getting at. We do have some documentation. We do have some insight into some aspects of day-to-day life,
Yeah, we have
but
plenty
we
actually.
but we have to speculate on so many other things. And the point I'm trying to make, where I'm going with this is, how do we draw that line? How do we know where to draw that line and say, okay, this we know, but this we have to speculate? This we think because X happened and Y happened, we can speculate that Z happened, but we can't say for certain. How do we know where to draw that line?
Well, the people that, I mean, but now we're getting into, so the people. So I was making a different argument of
Oh,
like
okay.
of us. Well, no, this is within it, but I
Hmm.
was just saying that from my personal position here in Miami, like now,
Hmm.
my perspective of Miami is coming from me observing,
Hmm.
but like someone in the future might see things
Right. That you're
in
not saying.
in context that I just simply, even though they're in the future, that I simply am not seeing
Right.
because I'm in it at the time. So it's kind of like a perception thing of the people of the time. Like we can't necessarily, although they're missing the context of my daily day to day,
Hmm.
they're not missing the context of an overview of how all those things put together in a methodical way, where I'm
Right.
not doing that from my vantage point. And in terms of of like how do they draw the line,
Hmm.
it depends. Broadly speaking, like you and I talking about this now,
Hmm.
we're talking like in generalities, but like if you take one Roman place,
Village. Yeah.
and like people go there, study there, document, and they can say
Hmm.
what speculation is
Hmm.
and what's actually there, and they can
Right.
tell you what the bones that they dug out, what kind of dietary life they led. Like they can do that.
Well,
And if they have records, because
Mhm.
records were left in some cases either in parchments that survived, or you know,
Right,
stoned in stone or something like. So they can give you what they have, and they do have, in that specific case, whichever that town or village
right.
would have been, they have the differentiation that you're asking about. But for our purposes, we're not talking about a specific. We're broadly speaking, like, we, you know, yeah. Where do you draw the line? In our minds, we're not
Well,
stuck.
because I think that there is a lot of speculation that, and I see this all the time in some of these documentaries that you see on television. You know, I don't watch a lot of TV. I I haven't sat down and watched a complete TV show in over 10 years. I just don't do it.
Yeah,
But while we're sitting there eating, the TV's on in the background, you know, or if I'm out talking to Linda, there's something playing in the background, and I catch little spots here and there. And the amount of speculation some of these people do, to me, it, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm just some guy. But I don't necessarily pick up a rock and decide that this is something sacred and holy when I have no evidence that points to that. And I think to automatically place a spiritual connection with every single thing in these people's lives, I think is doing them and modern science a disservice. To
I have a few.
automatically place, I mean,
I understood you, but I have a few issues with the way you're setting it up,
okay,
because you're. So here's the first thing that I'm noticing. You're making a critique of of these people that do this, and how do they extrapolate that some sort of like stone thing that looks like a carved something or other. How do they attach, or how do they leap to the assumption that 2,000, 3,000 years ago, so this thing, we're saying here from our perspective, it's a some sort of religious idol or whatnot.
yeah.
How do they leap to that conclusion
How
when
do
you're
they
doing?
make that conclusion when this is something that's newly discovered?
Yeah, I'm rephrasing your thing, like I'm
Hmm.
returning it to you,
Hmm.
so that you could see that I understood what you're saying. um but now here's the thing, that context that you just um laid out would work. Like, if you're saying it broadly, what you are, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But if you point to the example, like, let's say, if you were to say, well, in the town of Ephesus, there was this statue on this corner of this and that, and the scientist named such and such and such and such, and back in 2003 were there, and they decided that this statue was a symbol of such and such and this. If you and I disagree, because in that case it's not really clear. Like, if you do that,
Hmm.
if you go beeline,
Well, yeah,
to
context means everything
yeah,
in
but
this.
without that,
Hmm.
there's all sorts of things
Right.
that the opposite is true, broadly speaking, as well.
Obviously, if you're digging in the Valley of the Kings and you find a tomb, you can be pretty sure that some of this is going to be spiritually related and some of it's going to be related to whoever it was that was entombed there. Okay. And we can decipher most of the hieroglyphics now, and we're learning more every day. It's easier for us to read, but we can make some assumptions fairly safely. Um, there was a documentary on, they were in Cambodia, near Angkor Wat, and looking for other temples and using lidar, which they had never had the ability. They had the ability, they didn't have permission to do. And they were finding other temples. They were searching for temples. They knew about where they were, they just couldn't get confirmation. In that case, yes, it's a temple, there's going to be a spiritual connection. I get that. But you have other shows that seem to me like they just want to sensationalize things. And if you find three rocks arranged in a certain way, there's a spiritual meaning to those three rocks. I'm not ready to make that leap, especially when you don't even know what it is you've found yet. I think there's a little bit in some of these production companies, they're too eager to assign knowledge they don't have yet and jump to conclusions. Those are the ones, and that's where I get to, where do you draw the line? Because the guy out in the field who makes the discovery is not always the person who draws the conclusion. Because you've got people out in the field and they're working this dig and they're finding these relics and they're finding these bits and pieces, and then they go to somebody else for conservatorship and they're putting the information together, not the guy who's still out digging. Who makes the decision what this actually is and what it actually means?
I mean, I can give you an example of something that's concrete, that can be looked up,
Mm-hmm.
and we've talked about, which is the Ötzi's death.
Mm-hmm.
When Ötzi was discovered by some hikers,
Mm-hmm.
um, his body was frozen, and they said, "Oh, somebody must have been murdered out here."
Yeah.
And they came and they realized that it was something much more ancient,
Mm-hmm.
and they took him out, thawed him, and this, and that. The first, and he conserved all his like clothing and stuff, and he had
Yeah.
food in his stomach. Like there was all these things.
Yeah.
All those things are facts that are known.
Now, yeah. But
What's
at the
not
time, they didn't know any of that. So, yeah.
no, but I'm not. Let me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make the. I'm trying to frame the point.
Yeah.
Those things were known.
Mhm.
Obviously, they pulled the items from the stomach and they thawed
Sure.
and saw the items. Those things were known, and those things were put out there as known.
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't know, which they also explained, is that, was he running from something?
Right.
He has an arrow in his back. Did he get shot on the mountain? Did he get shot somewhere below and make his way up? Was he with people? No one else has been found there.
Right.
Was he? So then
Yeah.
they lay out the what we don't know. Like, do we know
Right.
what are the possibilities? That's an example of all this information, items, the stomach, and they pulled the DNA.
And I think that they did that correctly. There wasn't a lot of speculation.
But my point is that within this Otzi scenario
Mhm.
finding, you have all this data that's like stuff they collected and
Right.
DNA they
Stuff
drew,
that's known. Yes.
and they put that together and they give the reasons why.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's these unknowns of how did that happen? Well, that they don't, and they explain that they don't know. It must have been
Mhm.
that he was chased. We're not sure. Did he fall? One thing that they originally thought when they did his first face,
Mhm.
they made him into a Nordic looking guy.
Yeah.
He looks like a biker at a bar somewhere down in Key West,
Yeah.
doing a biker run or something like that. Um, but and that was just a few years ago.
Yeah.
They pulled his now. Utsi, in fact, had dark skin,
Mhm.
but dark skin in context of the time, there were three. There were dark skinned, light eyed people.
Mhm.
There were medium to light skinned, dark eyed people,
Mhm.
and then there were light people with dark eyes.
Mhm.
Those three groups became the Europeans of today.
Mhm.
So you have the first hunter gatherers with the light eyes, dark. The
Mhm.
middle people, which were the farmers, which had the dark eyes, light to
Mhm.
medium skin, dark hair. And then you had the Yamnaya, which were actually, for the most part, dark haired, dark
Mhm.
eyed, but light skinned. That was the mixture that happened that created the rest of. But Utsi did not contain any of that third combination of the Yamnaya people.
Mhm.
And after redoing his samples,
Mhm.
they found that he was closest to Sardinian people of today.
Okay.
It's not that he's Sardinian or that
Right.
Sardinians are them. It's that the population Sardinians are from,
Hmm.
which is mostly farmer population, which is
Hmm.
actually I'm 60% according to
Hmm.
FTDNA farmer.
Hmm. And
So
that's the group that he was closest related to.
he was closest, but
Yeah,
he was in a transition phase
right.
when other cultures were. So he was in a weird spot in time. They suggest.
But my point about that is, to me, I didn't hear a lot of speculation in any of that. These people admitted, we don't know. We're looking, we're investigating. And as they found more information and got test results back and got data, the story began to develop.
Yeah,
But it is, as you say, they still don't know. Was he being chased? Was he chasing somebody else? They don't know, was he the good guy or the bad guy in this scenario? All they know is it looks like he was killed,
yeah. They don't know.
but
They
they
don't
don't
know.
know anything.
They assume that since he has an arrow on his back,
Hmm.
you don't get that from moving forward towards an enemy. You get that from being shot in the back.
True.
So they lean towards that. Now, there could be any scenario where the arrow bounced or some who knows what, but
Yeah.
it's still within the world of margin of error of we don't know.
No.
Look, it's sort of like this.
And
It's let me go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's the point. They not speculating. They can throw out all kinds of little possibilities, but they're not speculating and stating it as a fact.
No, if you're speculating, you say, "Look, this is speculation," especially if it's a
That's
serious
my
thing.
point right
Yeah,
there. That's my point right there. You can
yeah.
speculate that those three rocks in my example, well, this may have some sort of a spiritual significance. Then again, they may have just piled it up because it looked nice.
It's a little bit like Art Bell. I
You
used to
know.
love, especially at night and listening. Like I used to drive down Chrome Avenue, which is
Hmm.
a pine tree on both sides type
Hmm.
road
Hmm.
that just keeps going. And late at night, after I get out of like working the casino or
Hmm.
whatever, I'd be driving home and I'd be listening to Art Bell, and it's creepy but fun because you're in the dark, you're driving the woods, and you're hearing all these fantastical stories. But the problem is that it's kind of like that like what you're suggesting because they're giving you so a guy is giving you a story that's calling up to a show. The host is taking him serious, like saying, well, asking questions, yeah, well, go on,
Hmm.
but there's no and people call up and says, yeah, that's got to be true, and like all this stuff, and but it's all fantasy stuff in that there's no evidence, like you're saying. All it is I guess anecdotal stuff
People's perceptions. Yeah.
that people might be just saying it for to lie and to mess around.
Yeah.
It could
Well,
be true, but either way, we can't hang our hat on it because we don't know.
no. And you can say what you'd like, because much the same situation that you're talking about, driving home from work late at night, that's all that's on the radio, listening to Art Bell as you're driving out,
Yeah,
home. You can say what you want about Art Bell. You can say what you want about the people that called him. I will say one thing. He was very, very good at what he did. He had subtle little ways
to tell.
of drawing information out of people and make them tell on themselves. Some of them were very good. Some of the people that called him were very good. But others, you could tell he was disregarding them after the first 90 seconds because he would ask the same question in four different ways and get them to contradict their own story within a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And then, okay, well, thanks for calling. And then that was it. He didn't spend any more time with it because
But
he
still,
didn't believe it. But he knew what he was doing.
but even still, there's
Mhm.
nothing really to. It's just a call situation, and it's the
Yeah.
same with these documentaries. Um,
Well,
they're not telling you
w-
where to find the information. They're just telling you what the information is, and you
some of
can't
them.
and you can't. Well, some of them, but you can't verify it.
No, you
It's
can't.
it's entertainment.
And that's my point. They're kind of sensationalizing a lot of this info and turning it in certain direction to try to make a point that has not been proven.
Right.
That's my problem with some of these. You know, it there are a lot of them that do go out of their way to let you know this is speculation. We can only speculate. We don't know. Others will not speculate at all. This is the data. This is what we know. We're still studying it. We're still investigating it. The ones that I have a problem with are the people who you can tell are taking a little bit of information over here and a little bit of information over here, putting it together and going, that must be it. And then presenting it as fact.
Well, but broadly speaking, we're not
You
looking
don't
at one
know that
specific.
that's a fact. So,
But that there's a lot like that.
mhm. Those are the ones that I have a problem with.
Well, there's a lot like that because that's what's entertainment. It's kind of like going to that Cleopatra movie or documentary thing or um,
Docudrama.
docudrama. But the problem is that, and I now see the divide.
Mhm.
But prior to a few years back, 1 plus 1 equals purple.
Yeah.
Um, the 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 thing is that a lot of people may it appears like
Mhm.
get very upset at the changing of history, such as Cleopatra,
Mhm.
because of that docudrama.
Mhm.
Because in their minds, their scope of history preservation is docudramas. In
Mhm.
other words,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all you have to do,
Absolutely.
all you have to do to clear that stuff up
Mhm.
is go to your local library, or hell, you could go online. There's
Mhm.
plenty of documentation that sets things straight, but
Exactly.
it appears that people's threshold of consuming history
Mhm.
is based on
Yes.
secondhand telling
Right.
and what
And
you see on
fictional accounts as well. You're
exactly
not going to get a good idea of day to day life in the 1940s in America by watching 13 episodes of The Three Stooges.
right,
You know, you're not going to learn about the 30s by watching the Marx Brothers. You'll learn
right,
about the movies of the 30s, but that's all you're going to get.
right.
You
And
know,
you can get the imagery of what things would have
oh,
looked like
sure, you
then,
know what a phone looks like, you know what the cars look like, but that's about it. That wasn't real life, that was fiction.
right? But for a
You
lot
know,
of people, their
hmm
start and end of what history is
hmm
comes from these shows. So in effect, people are being informed
hmm
in their minds in a serious way through these shows and things that you're talking about.
yeah.
When it's not supposed to be that, it's supposed to be a dramatization with
Right.
some historical things included so you can fantasize and but you should it's kind of like superheroes. Just because you read comic books doesn't mean you can jump out of a
Yeah.
window.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know that you're having a fun time, but you know that you can't just by wearing a cape.
You can wear the suit all you want, but you will never be Spider-Man.
Yeah,
That's all there is to it.
my grandmother used to teach me she as a kid, and I was like, don't have to tell me. Like in my mind, I was like I felt that I kind of over I kind of knew the differential, but for her, she was being careful. And she said, "You
Sure.
know that just last year there were very kids reading and watching all these comics and stuff that they jumped out the window and they and it was terrible. I mean, that was a bad idea."
Well,
And
yeah.
as a kid, I would say I know I mentioned to her roughly. I said to her, "Oh, that was really dumb that they did that. I can't. That makes no sense to me." And I'd walk away.
Mhm.
I had it very clear since a kid. I knew that when I went to the
Yeah.
movies, that I'm watching. It doesn't matter what now.
Yeah.
I will be clear. When it came to horror stuff, rationality went out the window. I did not. But when it came to like a portrayal of what this or that,
Yeah, I've never seen a coyote hold up a sign, you know?
I didn't think I could like I didn't make that associate. I didn't
Yeah.
blend those two things.
No, yeah, I mean, you can't. You know, just because you paint a tunnel on a wall doesn't mean a truck's going to come down the road through it. You know, that doesn't happen. Yeah, kids can differentiate between fact and fiction. Just,
Many of them, I guess.
you know,
I mean, maybe some not. But the point is that um, we consume And it's true for news. It's true
Uh,
for everything.
if you're getting your history through pop culture, you need to dig deeper. That's all I'll say. You need. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm just saying you need to dig deeper. You know. Um,
Yeah, and there's another phenomenon that I've run into that. So look, there's just because someone's an iconic figure
mhm,
and you happen to agree with them, or you happen to like them and therefore agree with them,
mhm,
or you like their worldview, or any number of things,
mhm,
it does not necessarily follow automatically that they're telling the truth, or
mhm,
that you are under the clarity of truth
mhm.
by going in that direction of just accepting what someone that you trust
Yeah,
says. So
yeah, I
even if,
agree.
yeah, even if they're incredibly, you relate to them.
Mhm.
It happened with Jordan Peterson for
Yeah,
me. I like Jordan Peterson's his but he's done a lot of, and humans are, you know, a
yeah,
mixture of many things because nobody's, if there's, it's impossible. So I'm not saying it to, but I saw huge, and this guy's a professor, and I saw huge gaps of assumptions in certain topics
yeah.
that I just couldn't, I couldn't believe it, because I'm just a guy from Sweetwater, but that's an assumption, my friend.
Mhm.
That you just said, that you just said is a leap. You took all these things for granted, accepted as such, that needed more eyeballs on it before getting to, now mind you, he's got, just by sheer fact of who he is, or what he does or what he studied, much more clarity than I do on
Yeah,
a ocean of things.
yeah. He's
I can
got
only,
a he's
I
got a
can,
practice and everything else. He's got a lot of empirical research.
right. So I can't, so I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that I found a gap
Empirical data.
that's Mickey Mouse level of
Yeah.
like, hey, come on. The problem is that in order for us to get from A to B in a conversation
Mhm.
over any topic, we have to accept that the other person accepts each word that comes in line in a sentence and paragraph, to understand that they know what that means in terms of how you're laying it out in order to get to the end of the darn explanation. So you have to confide in people that they're going to accept or
Right.
believe the same notions, one leapfrogged after the other. But when people don't accept that,
Yeah,
then
you're up against a brick wall.
you're up against a brick wall, because then they say, well, wait a second, how about this? How about that? How about this? How about that? How about that? And you can never get to the end of the thing without addressing those things. And so I saw him do something like that. He's human, but there's no correction there ever since. And I've seen that from a lot of people.
Well, that's why I constantly, I don't know, it's more of a recurring theme, and I hope nobody thinks that I'm talking down to them, or hope nobody thinks that I'm trying to push any kind of an agenda, because I'm not. If I'm trying to push any kind of an agenda, it is think for yourself. I'm not trying to convince anybody to think like me. Think for yourself. Don't be too willing to believe everything that anybody says, because people are people. We are imperfect beings. We have biases. We all uh, we all make mistakes. We all quote incorrect information that has been uh, rebutted time and time, proven incorrect time and time and time again.
And we accept it as a given.
And we accept it because, well, I mean, it's the old saying, you can't unring a bell. If somebody tells you for your entire life that moss only grows on the north side of a tree, you'll believe it. But what about all the times you see yourself that moss growing all the way around the tree in a 360-degree circle? They can't all be the north because you're not on the North Pole or the South Pole. So don't be too eager to believe everything that anybody says, even if you tend to agree with them a majority of the time. Think for yourself. If I have an agenda, it's that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess when you interact with people, there's the exchange of information, and
Sure.
then why is the information being exchanged? What's the purpose of the information being exchanged from the sender?
Yeah.
Um, is the information being sent for clarification, for the enrichment of the receiver?
Hmm.
Um,
Is it a correction? Is it a casual discussion? Are you
right,
in a position where you're trying to teach something to somebody, or are you the person asking the questions because you genuinely want to know?
right,
I mean, there's a lot of context.
right, and within the casual category,
Hmm.
if you've ever seen those thought bubble, or you know how they say, write an idea, write a circle on it, and then draw lines that extend out, and
Hmm.
in each um, following line, add circles that are subcategories of that main thing
Hmm.
until you create this
Oh
branching
yeah,
out.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And they do that so that it's like, let's say, water, and then you have all the little branch sub branches of little points. Well, there's a little bit of a, during the casual conversation, of a free flow of throwing stuff, ideas in the air, and they land. Sometimes they miss, and there's a free flow creativity or release, or I guess a daily summary of a bunch of stuff that people are sharing in an
Sure.
exchange. But and the other ones you said, but there's one, or there's a few of them, that are the troublesome ones. Number one, actually, there's a few
But
troublesome ones, and there's one that
there are several.
and there's one that pre so the sharing ignorance, because you mentioned that, out of assumptions and just tossing assumptions around, and it, like telephone, but
Well,
that aside, well no, let me get this thing
okay,
right.
go ahead.
The bad one is, although that's bad, the assumption thing is a malicious intent, or a
Right.
fraudulent intent on the part of the sender,
Hmm.
in order to create,
Well, for any reason. If it's
in order,
fraudulent, it's just fraudulent.
well, not for any reason, well, for any outcome, yeah. So, but if you're being fraudulent or malicious in sending out information in order to deceive,
Hmm.
deception, as opposed to looking for clarity,
Hmm.
um, well, that's done a lot.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of. So look, people lie a lot.
Yeah. For many, many reasons.
I wasn't aware, to a degree, uh, to the
Mm.
extent that that's so. Um, so it's a very treacherous
Yeah,
landscape,
it
um,
is.
because some people have ill intent in order to propel certain notions,
Hmm.
for a certain end. Um, but
Usually for personal gain.
yeah, I
Not
mean,
always, but usually. Not always.
yeah, I mean, mostly we see it in the political sphere.
Oh, we see it all over the place. I mean,
But
you
I'm
know,
saying that
yeah.
it's ripe with it.
Oh, sure.
Um, and people fall into these funnels and boxes depending on the brand, the major brand.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I'm team blue or I'm team red. That's convenient, I just use those colors. But um anybody that associates with that one team or the next,
Yeah.
people will be more receptive of said, like, let's say, talk show host or news person, simply because um
They're on that side. Yeah.
they're on that side. And that's kind of the wrong way to go about it,
Well,
although in virtually difficult to separate
and
that.
that's why I say think for yourself. That's why I constantly preach think for yourself. I mean, if without getting political, you can find truth everywhere. Doesn't The truth has no agenda. The truth knows no party. It just simply is. And you can find truth over here and you can find truth over here. You can find truth with every group out there. That doesn't necessarily mean one is right or one is wrong. It just is. You know what I mean? Am I putting is that making any sense at all?
So you're
Because I just
saying,
confused myself.
so you're, well, I guess the way I can explain what you just said, maybe I'm wrong, but is that truth just is truth,
Hmm.
and the wrapping that one person or the other sends out as the carrier
Uh-huh.
of said truth to whatever degree. Maybe this is not what you were saying, but this is what I drew from it. Um, may sound different or may take a different route
Yeah. Let,
than the next person, but it's within the thing. It's
well,
within the truth thing.
let's take that your example of water. You can describe water one way and I can describe it a totally different way, and we'll both be right. It doesn't mean that there's any kind of a conflict there. It's just two different sets of eyes and two different brains interpreting the same thing. It's still the same stuff, you know? It just is.
Okay,
It
yeah.
has no agenda. But your perception of it may be completely different than mine. And when you describe it, you would describe it completely differently than the way I would describe it.
Mhm.
So, but that doesn't mean either one of us is being untruthful.
Yeah, we're just lasering in and
Exactly.
delivering it the way we are seeing it, but drawn from, but that's different than taking something like water and trying to
But
create a
but if
different.
but if I had an agenda, I could come up and convince you that this is the most evil stuff on the planet
Right.
if I chose to present it in that direction. Stay away from it. Everybody who has ever drank this has died.
And that's true.
100% true.
And it's
Everybody who has ever drank this has died.
and that's and that's still a truthful statement. It's funny how that works because you know.
But it's the delivery. Stay away from it. This is a solvent. If you drink this, you will die. Without it, you'll die.
And everybody that's ever drunk it has died
Hmm.
eventually.
Eventually, I didn't say you were going to die because of this,
Mhm.
but it's a fact. And you can say that about anything. Everybody who has ever touched wood has died. Everybody who has ever looked at a stone has died. Correlation does not imply causation, but it's how you want to wrap it. So, I mean, where do
Yeah.
you want to go from there? I mean, but that's kind of in a nutshell. You and I could describe that same glass of water in two different ways. You make it sound like the absolute best thing in the world, and I could make it sound like the most evil thing, evil substance to ever walk. Walk? Well, it doesn't walk, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
To ever exist, it's all on presentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but none of it is speculation. It's all provable fact.
Yeah. But in context, everything else that's the words that surround it that you're using for the purpose that you're using
Mhm.
could be sitting
Right.
on fraud. It could be sitting on deception,
but
fraud,
but I but I
or
I would be very careful about that. You see, you can because you can package it like that. It's water, H2O, two hydrogen molecules, one oxygen molecule,
Mhm.
two hydrogen. Let's make that more scientific. Dihydro. Okay, two hydrogen molecules. One. oxygen molecule, monoxide, dihydrogen monoxide. So I could call this I would be wrong because that's not officially what it's called, but you could make that connection. Two hydrogen molecules, one oxygen molecule. It's dihydrogen monoxide. And I could convince everybody that dihydrogen monoxide is dangerous. If you breathe it, you will die. Everybody who has ever drank it will die, has died.
Yeah, but
It's
the
a
context.
solvent. It, you know,
Yeah, but the context it's surrounded in
mhm,
is the question that everybody will die and this and that. If you
mhm,
do that,
right.
and the scenario is that that's the information that you're sending out so that someone doesn't drink water, period,
Mhm.
then you're using it for a deceptive and
Exactly.
malicious thing.
But you have to prove my intent because I'm just stating facts. If you breathe it, you will die. You cannot dispute that. Everybody who has ever drank it has died. You can't dispute that. It is a solvent. It's called the universal solvent for a reason. You can't dispute that. I'm not saying anything false. It's the way I'm saying it that scares the living crap out of people, or potentially could scare the living crap out of people. You know?
Lots of things scare people that are truthful.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah.
One of the ones that I, I I ran into this professor doing this conversation, and it's the same thing with the IQ thing, which we're not going to delve in, but I just want to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
People take one thing
Mm-hmm.
and from it attach all the things they want to be true,
Mm-hmm.
as if all of that's going to get past the security checkpoint
Yeah.
and out into the past the lobby, um and they believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So the comment section, all these things in the
Yeah.
most derogatory sense, leaping to conclusions, attaching things that they want to be true,
Mm-hmm.
or it apparently seems like things that they accept as like, well, it's gotta be because and the people offering information are figures of authority, sort of, and so nobody questions the ones offering the information.
Mm-hmm.
No, because they're the authority, so you don't question them. Well, it's okay to question authority
It,
if
it,
they give you the answer, the correct answer, or an answer. Then they're explaining their reasoning as to why, and you can then parse that out, and it's a never-ending cycle. But at some point, the ship steers from what they're saying is truthful to what they're saying is what we started with, which is speculative.
exactly. And that's why footnotes and sources are so important. You can read a Wikipedia article about anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Just pick a subject, any Wikipedia article. Get down actually into the footnotes and check the sources of a lot of this information. And that is, to me, that's half of the fun of reading one of those articles is really he made that statement. When did he do that? And go down and look into the thing. Okay, in this interview, he said, yeah, okay, it's a direct quote. And the interview's on tape, and you can go to this link over. There it is on YouTube. I see it coming out of his mouth. Oh, all right. You know, so when somebody comes along and quotes that, I have a little bit more confidence in believing that that person actually said that. An interview with John Lennon about this, that, or the other thing. Oh, okay. Yeah, there he is on tape talking with this guy. He said that. Okay, that's cool. Great. So if I see somebody mention it, as you say in a YouTube comment, okay, there's some veracity to that story. Now you got 14 people coming from out of left field. He was never in New York on that week. Dude, there's the interview right there. You know?
And you can always argue like um, the endless loop and
Sure.
say, well, maybe the article was false. Well, do you have any? Um,
And that's why I say keep looking at the sources. That's like I said, a lot of that's half of the fun for me because you'll find competing sources saying two different things. And it's like, well, which one of these is true? It's like that comedian I was telling you about, Dave Gorman, a lie chasing a lie. It was on a Wikipedia, on his Wikipedia page, it said that he had taken a year off from doing stand-up comedy and did a hitchhiking tour of the Pacific Rim nations, which he never did. And he mentioned it in his blog, or no, on Twitter. He mentioned it on Twitter, and some guy came in and said, "Yeah, that was pretty cool, but don't worry, it's gone." And he went back and he looked, and sure enough, it's gone. But then it came back, and this time it had a footnote. It had a reference. Turns out it was a small local paper somewhere there in the UK that had printed that story. But he still never did it. So now you have a lie chasing a lie. He never did this thing, a newspaper said, and they're using that newspaper as the reference, and it's still there.
mhm.
So sometimes you do have to check more than one reference. You know, I tend to
Yeah.
believe the guy that says, no, I never did it. He says, but it's gotten to the point to where he's almost ready to start saying, yeah, I really had a good time, you know?
One of the arguments that these people make in that those channels that I mentioned earlier, where they go to the precursors to biblical and
Hmm.
Jewish, writings and
Yeah,
such. One of the arguments that they put out there, which I totally agree with this argument, is that a lot of people discard certain documents from the past, biblically speaking,
hmm,
um, because there's not sufficient proof to them. Maybe to others, yes, to others, not. I mean, you can't.
yeah,
There's so much you can do going back in time in terms of like documentation,
sure.
like we've spoken about. I mean, there's a lot of people that we accept that existed
Hmm.
that there's no actual at the time knowledge of them in writing, like Alexander the Great. There are things, but like it's not sufficient for the some people's tastes, as an example. But one thing I agree with them is that apart from that,
Hmm.
some people poo-poo the in current days, um, the things that we've taken from the history that have been incorporated in a subconscious way into our society, that we just play out,
Yeah,
that inform us without us even realizing.
yeah.
And he makes the argument, or these people make the argument, that those lessons of the past and those stories of the past,
Hmm.
whether or not they're in concrete sketched out,
Hmm.
have been passed down, and they're informative at a cultural level
Hmm.
likewise,
Yeah,
and that has value in itself.
yeah.
um and I agree with that. There's a
Now,
cultural aspect to the religions that we inhabit, or that exist along with us today.
sure,
um there's a cultural aspect to it
sure.
that's, in my opinion, just as valuable, just as valuable, just on the cultural level.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into the specifics of this happened, that didn't happen, this happened. You can, but that aside, the traditions are
Hmm.
valuable
Yeah.
because it's what a grandfather shares with his grandson and passes it along generationally.
Well, and a lot of lives are based on that. I mean, you can't fathom living without the culture that you grew up in, nor should you. I can't fathom living without the culture that I grew up with, nor should I. Neither one is right and neither one is wrong. They just are. You know, one of them is not good and one of them is not bad. They just are. Much like the truth, they have no agenda. They're just, I don't know, this is getting metaphysical here, but they're just ways of life you grew up in and that I grew up in.
Yeah, they just are part of the culture at large, handed down, and it's normalized and it's accepted, even though, contrary to what we were talking about in the first half concerning proof and such and this and that, we accept it because it's just part of, let's call it, the fabric of society at large. Um, and there's people that push at these things, but the majority of people, to one degree or the next, accept certain things as the norm, and that's where we get that scale of this is
Well,
the norm.
but let's face it, it's also a major part of who we are. We would be different people if we were raised in different cultures. So it is a big part of who we are and a big part of what makes us who we are.
Yeah, I was thinking about cultural stuff. I'm always sort of like thinking of different little things, but and I was thinking of myself in particular, where and we talked a little bit about this in the pre, I think, or now we did early. I don't remember now when, but being a first generation American, I love saying it,
Mm-hmm.
especially within the context of me studying all these things in the past few years,
Yeah.
in terms of, because it identifies a situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living it, so I never paid attention to it, but due to studying
Yeah.
a personal history, I'm kind of bird's eye viewing it. And I like saying it like that because it's almost sort of like I'm getting climbing up on a ladder and looking down and
You're
saying,
able to pull back and go, oh, I see now. Yeah.
exactly. And I like
Mm-hmm.
that because it gives context to exactly what's going on, or at
It,
least to a degree. And so
it's
here's the thing. What's
it's
that?
that right there that got me into this whole thing.
So here's the thing. Yeah, well, yeah, that's an important thing because it opens up doors to understand. Oh, okay, that's how that fits.
Mm-hmm.
At least better than before
Yeah.
you started the thing. Well, I was thinking that being a first generation American, my parents were born and raised
Mm-hmm.
in a country, an island country that was a stopping point for them in a sense. No, they were born there,
Yeah.
but their parents, except my one of the uh, but basically their ancestors were immigrants to there.
Mm-hmm.
And using one of the examples, Canary Islands,
Mm-hmm.
they had a culture there and still have that used very specific dances,
Mm-hmm.
music, culinary, such and such.
Colors. I mean,
Also,
just
also,
kinds of things.
well, let me there
Mm-hmm.
in that place, the people that down the line then I came from
Mm-hmm.
on that line, they had this culture, and there's still that culture, but whatever. So, but my ancestral people left that place
Mm-hmm.
turn of the century, so it's not long ago. It's like 100 and some odd years ago,
Mm-hmm.
no more or
Yeah.
less within that range. Ended up in a another island nation in the American side of the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was adjacent culturally, but different because now you're in a different place.
Yeah.
And so their habits, when my grandmother's born, incorporates other features that maybe didn't exist. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying anything specific because I'm just saying broadly, but like from Canary to Cuba, what traits culturally
Mm-hmm.
were left behind, which ones were adapted and or added,
Mm-hmm.
and then from
Which were
there,
blended together.
which were blended together, and then from there, hopscotching over to Florida,
Mm-hmm.
then I am born derivatives of that original place,
Mm-hmm.
what do I offer the world around me and the people I interact with and my personality or notions or behaviors or acceptable lines drawn in the sand
Mhm,
come from that original place that I'm not aware of because simply put,
mhm,
it was handed down generationally. It came into my understanding from observing my family, and now I exist in a paradigm of America, US,
mhm,
with features that I cannot personally
mhm.
separate from America.
Right.
I can't do it. How much did I get handed passed down
Well,
that
if
I'm not even aware of?
if you were to have this discussion with your father, how much of what you're saying now would he what would his answers be to some of this? How much can he separate America from Cuba? And then you talk to his father, how much could he separate? So that's what I mean when I say it's part of what makes us who we are, because without knowing it as you were growing up, you were learning things from each one of those cultures a little bit here and there
Yeah, in
without
whatever
even knowing it.
degree. But I couldn't. You can't unless you say something like I don't know rice and beans with this
Hmm.
particular dish. I
Yeah.
could say, oh, well, that's originates in Cuba, but it's
Hmm.
derived from whatever place in Spain or
Well,
Canary.
sure. And how much of that had to adapt because, like, take Canary Islands to Cuba, different plants, different animals, different fish, different everything.
Hmm.
But they had different ways of cooking and ways of
But
preparing
that's
and this, that.
food.
And, that's just one quick little
We
snippet,
we can
you know.
identify food because it's like there, but inside of us.
But that's one little snippet. That's all I was getting at as an
No, no, I
example.
understand, but
Okay.
I'm saying inside of us, inside of
Hmm.
me. Like for instance, there's a difference to use your example from a Mark Lindsay of today, you
Hmm.
and your dad one
Exactly.
generation removed, but then tracing it to a Lindsay that steps off of a boat here for the first time
Yeah.
that was taught in another place.
Yeah.
So he's infused with a culture, but here
Hmm.
you're now in an environment where there's a little bit of different things happening,
Yeah.
sometimes extremely different. And then your generation, as that
Hmm.
Mark Lindsay, I'm sorry, as that Lindsay that stepped out,
Hmm.
for the first time, then his generations grow
Yeah.
up with a father that was from that place across the way, but they're going to school or whatever on the farm or whatever the scenario.
Sure.
They're surrounded by other people in an American context. How much did they keep from the father's teachings that were very much British or English
Hmm.
or Scottish, and then down the line to
Yeah.
you, how much of that you're not even aware of
Exactly.
is
Exact.
is that's my question, which obviously we can't have an answer because it's just part
Yeah.
of us now.
Yeah. It just is.
It
But
just is.
we know no other way.
And we couldn't even separate it if we wanted to, I
No.
think.
No. You
Unless it's
couldn't.
something like my family tradition during Christmas was to go up and climb caves and pull bats out and drain them of blood, and that's just how we are.
Yeah.
Unless it's some sort of so odd,
Hmm.
separate thing from the rest of your surroundings,
Hmm.
you can't point it out
No.
because it's part of our
Well,
thing.
and we are creatures of our environment. I mean, we are the sum gain of our experiences. I mean, the sum of our experiences, not the sum gain. And we can only relate what we know, what we've been taught, what we've experienced ourselves. That's the only thing that we can relay. Sure, you and I can have discussions about Jimi Hendrix, neither of us having met the man, but both of us having listened to his music. But that's the only frame of reference that we have. You know, we never met the person. We never spent any time with the person. So everything we can discuss has to do with what we've read about him or what we've listened to, or in discussions we have had with people who may have met him.
Right.
So,
The essence, or what we think is the essence, or what we derive of the essence from those, is what we have that we share.
and two different brains with two different sets of ears with two different sets of eyes are going to interpret those things differently.
Yeah. Well, let me
So,
say this. Let me say this since you brought up Jimi Hendrix. I saw. I don't watch it a lot, but I
uh-huh.
ran into a Conan, the talk show host.
Yeah.
He's got a podcast, and he's got like a producer guy with him.
Hmm.
And in this episode, I had to click on it. I
Hmm.
think I shared it with a friend of mine. I don't know if I shared it with you or not. I shared something else with you, but I shared it with one guy that really likes Rush. But whatever. Um, and I just revealed what the point is of the whole thing. I say there's no lying in me. I just threw it. I threw out the whole. It's about Rush the band. The producer guy is a lifelong associate of Conan,
Hmm.
and he's a devout, apparently obsessive, same guy, but
Hmm.
he's totally into Rush,
Hmm.
and to the point where he knows all the freaking live recordings, which version.
He has the bootleg from the secret concert on the Isle of Wight in
Yeah,
1978. You know.
that's how this guy is. That's how I mean.
Okay.
Well, so they're talking there, and he says, "Well," Conan says, "Well, let's bring our guest up." And he supposedly he didn't know who, and Geddy Lee pops up. Hey, and he's like, and he's just sitting there normal and stuff. And Conan harps on that because he says, "I just brought you your idol, the person that you worship. You can ask him any questions. You're just sitting there casually and this and that." And he says, "No, with all due respect, I love the music, but I wouldn't want to meet meet my idol. I'm fine consuming the materials that you have produced, which I'm very grateful for. But I understand, people, pulling at, tugging at your sleeve everywhere you go. So I'm really not one of those that wants an intimate, thing." And
Yeah.
Conan was ragging on him for that because he says, "What? How dare you insult Geddy Lee in front of Geddy Lee on the screen?" And Geddy Lee said something to the effect of, "Well, I really wouldn't want to meet you either," or something like that. So it was a back and
Yeah.
forth.
The feeling is mutual, dude.
But at the end of the conversation,
Uh,
um, the producer guy shared so much information in front of Geddy Lee about things that he wanted to be released in the future.
mhm.
That he said, "You're gonna have to make me a list of that because you're very knowledgeable." Because Geddy Lee had no idea what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah.
The guy that made the music,
Hmm.
as opposed to the guy that consumes the guy that consumes the music knew things
Hmm.
that were
That the
true to
guy
him.
that made the music didn't realize
Didn't
or didn't
realize
remember.
because in his paradigm, Geddy Lee
Hmm.
is positioned in
Hmm.
a situation where, like we were talking before, you can't hover above yourself.
Yeah. And see
He's
what,
in it while he's doing it. So
yeah.
other people that get into it will know things that the guy that did it, didn't know. So that's a paradigm
Yeah.
in itself that kind of attaches with everything else that we were talking about.
This went in weird directions, but yes. Do you watch Professor Rock,
Yeah,
the
sometimes.
YouTube channel?
Yeah,
Sometimes
sometimes I do.
the number of times, I mean, the host, Adam Reeder, he's good. He's very good at what he does. The number of times he's interviewed somebody, he's sitting there talking with, oh my gosh, pick us. He'll be sitting there talking with Randy Bachman, and Adam will say something. The number of times one of the people he's interviewing has said, "Damn, you know your stuff. I didn't even remember that," is just mind boggling. He's one of those guys. He knows and he researches and he goes into an interview very well prepared. And when he's talking to one of his childhood heroes. I grew up listening to your music. You were one of my childhood heroes. I think this song is one of the best songs ever made, and yada, yada, yada. He can tell him what studio, when it was recorded. He can tell him who was there, talking about all kinds of different stories. And the times the stars will go, damn, you're good. I don't even remember that. It just blows your mind. I love that kind of thing.
It's an amazing thing because at the same time, it also it informs us that, like someone like Bob Dylan,
Hmm.
I don't know this, but I'm picturing it. So this is
Hmm.
kind of anecdotal and my impressions.
Yeah.
Um, he's writing all this music, and he would sit at the typewriter and he would write, but he has a whole ensemble of producers, of record keepers,
Yeah.
of audio and sound recording people,
Yeah.
of librarians, I would assume, to catalog
Secretary, all
certain
this stuff. Yeah.
co-writers so that they can, do some publishing,
Hmm.
and so there's this whole elaborate world around, um, I guess, let's say
This
the
one guy.
artist,
Yeah.
one guy that's also in a sense a a product in a way as
Hmm.
well, off of his name and his work.
Sure.
All those people, even though that one guy is in the middle of it, he doesn't. I'm only speaking from assumption because I couldn't picture it, but maybe it's the opposite of what I'm assuming. You can't be on top of all that.
I I I thought that's where you were gonna go. And about the only person that I can think of that I have ever heard of that did stay on top of everything was Frank Zappa.
Nah, that's a good point.
But
But
that's
even
the
he delegated.
but
But he,
that's the only person that I can think of that kept that much control
that,
himself.
that is true. But he delegated. He had to. So when he did a music video, you
Mhm.
can't be the guy in the. So what I'm getting at. So that's true. So like point blank, or I agree with that because it sounds freaking, knowing my reading of Frank Zappa books and such and the
Mhm.
history, that sounds like a sure thing, and I'm sure there's others.
But you're absolutely right. But he did not do everything himself.
But let me take it to the thing which is kind of capping or
Mhm.
bookending the point,
Mhm.
which we've said already. But I think Frank Zappa would not have
Mhm.
the perspective of cameraman 2 during his show in
Right.
Cincinnati in 1983.
Right.
I'm just throwing that out there as
Sure.
as a thing.
As an
Um,
example. Yeah.
and the people around him and that vantage point from the concert. Sure,
Right.
he has the camera, the footage, the film footage, um, but that experience from that cameraman looking on to the show in his position and work,
Mhm.
in conjunction with the ensemble that produced that show for Frank Zappa to do what he had to do,
Right.
um, or even the audience that witnessed the show, or the people working the stands for hats and shirts and such.
Or even deciding that that was the venue they were going to perform in that night and not someplace 1,500 miles away.
All the people there
Mhm.
had a perspective that, from their vantage point, had I guess, the fixation point was Frank Zappa's concert.
Mhm.
So in context, you could have, let's say there was 100,000 people there. That sounds like an awful lot. Let's say there's 40,000 people there. That's an awful lot. Let's
Anyway.
say there's 15,000 people there, 20,000 people there. If they're all to be given notepads and pencils or computers and laptops to write out their experience of that event at that time with their stories from their vantage points included,
Mhm.
including cameramen, the producers, the advert
Yeah.
promoters, the this, the that, the agents, how much the money transactions, the shirts sold,
Sure.
you would have a library of books that would fill a library of books. uh,
Did
um,
but did you read about everything they found in his estate when after he passed?
Yeah, reels and reels.
volumes
Yeah,
of, well, I mean, just music that he had recorded or had written, and things like what you're talking about. He kept everything. I'm sure he didn't have memory of everything. I can't imagine what it's like to be on the road 250 days of the year. How do you know what city you played in? Because after a while, they would all look the same, wouldn't they? So,
yeah.
but he kept everything. If somebody asked him where he played in August of 1969, he could go to 1969, pull it out, and say, let's find out. Here's where I played here, 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 here. He kept that kind of stuff.
Well,
I would imagine they're still going through it,
well,
but
the amount of data he collected and conserved, um,
was just
as
mind
opposed
boggling.
as opposed to somebody, let's say in the 1800s, that
Mm-hmm.
worked on a farm somewhere,
Yeah,
and maybe at best you have a tombstone with a name etched on it and a
yeah.
date, if you're lucky,
Mm-hmm.
um, or someone that,
Even if there was indeed a stone.
or someone that went with the plague
Mm-hmm.
and buried in some communal thing, or
Mm-hmm.
there's a the amount of information with Frank Zappa is voluminous,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. Um, um, boy, I was gonna say something that was a non sequitur, but just the same. It was cool and it was
Well,
useful, but
the only reason I brought up Zappa was because in when you were talking about Dylan, where he had this team of people around him that were taking care of things, I was agreeing with that. Um, I've seen interviews with Paul McCartney where he can't remember half of the songs he wrote. He has written so many and has done so many things. He'll have 30 seconds of this over here on this tape and 3 lines of lyric over here in this notebook, and it's off to the side. He doesn't remember what all he's written. He knows what he's published, and he knows what he's recorded on albums that have been sold to the public, that have been released to the public. But once you get beyond that, he can't remember what all he's written.
well, we can't. Yeah, we're living in when we go to sleep and wake up with the past attached to us, but there
Mm-hmm.
it's locked away somewhere back there,
Yeah.
and we can bring it up according to if it makes sense or not. There's something happening there that things
Mm-hmm.
get triggered that push up memories, but the access to the whole plethora
Mm-hmm.
of events,
Yeah.
there's a lot there. We
It,
can't
it,
funnel that out.
exactly. What shoes did you wear on your first date? I mean, I'm pretty confident that I wore shoes, but I couldn't tell you what they were, you know, and I was there. so,
Yeah. Um, the non
but
sequitur, which
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the non sequitur, which I remember. No, you go ahead, because now I'll remember it.
No, go for it, because I was going to go
It's
in
a non
somewhat different
sequitur. We're
direction.
gonna deviate.
That's
But
fine.
so, um, I ran across, or I don't know what triggered it for me. But I had ran across a time ago, and then again a few times. There's an image. Oh, now I remember what. Thumbing through Facebook, I saw a picture of Salvador Dali.
Oh, okay.
He's an artist from the
Right.
early 20th century. He was born in Cadiz, Spain,
Hmm.
um, and a very famous
Artist. Yeah.
psychedelic uh, type painter and stuff. He could paint very classically,
Hmm.
but he got into some really weird whatnots. But a long time
Oh,
ago,
very weird.
yeah, very weird, like dreamscape type stuff. And a long time ago, I saw news footage of him, and
Hmm.
in the news footage, he's being wheeled. He was older,
Hmm.
like older. He was
Yeah.
being wheeled out of some New York building
Hmm.
where he was staying,
Yeah.
and he had a blanket over his knees,
Hmm.
um, and his face had a look that reminded me of the look that my grandfather had in his later years. I would dare to say, this is anecdotal, but I would
Mhm.
dare to say, at least impressionist in my, that he had this scared look.
Mhm.
There's something around the eyes and the mouth slightly open
Mhm.
that I would place as something that I can't put my finger on perfectly, but would say it's something an older person, Spanish person's look. And it was powerful because I attached it immediately when I saw the film footage on YouTube, and I remembered my grandfather said that looks like the look, and in my mind. And that aside, what I was going to the non sequitur, which this is, but Dolly had an interview when he was younger,
Mhm.
older but still younger than what I just mentioned,
Yeah.
where he was interviewed, and the interviewer said, "You know, because you're one of the greatest painters, and that must feel incredible. You know your skill."
Mhm.
And he said, "Oh, I would consider Rembrandt or this, that, and the like." He started naming off people that he considered the greats,
Yeah.
and he said, "But I wouldn't consider myself the greats. I'm competent."
Yeah.
He says, "I'm competent, but I'm not great." And the interview, surely Dali, because Dali was
Yeah.
just amazing. He could paint a Rembrandt,
Mhm.
and he did. Like there's actual perfect,
Yeah.
lifelike, but he decided to go a different route,
Right.
psychedelic like and stuff. But in any
Yeah.
surrealism,
Surrealism. Yes.
um,
I was struggling with that word. I couldn't remember it.
but here's the thing. In the context of what he said, he says, oh, I'm competent at best, and he says, and I don't want to paint fantastic, amazing pictures. No, no, I want to paint competent pictures, okay pictures, because I want to live a long time.
Mhm.
And and like the interviewer's like, well, and he says, well, yes, and he's saying this in Spanish, and he
Mhm.
says, because frankly, I'd rather live. He says, I'd rather paint average pictures and live a long time than paint the perfect picture and it be over.
And
In
have
his
nothing to
mind,
look forward to. Yeah.
in his mind, this is the, or at least this is what he was offering the interviewer. He's saying that this idea of I'm interpreting it, but this
Sure.
idea of perfection, that once you do your thing, that it's the ultimate thing.
What have you got to look forward to?
That's it.
Yeah.
So let's keep it in here
Keep it real.
and produce a lot,
Yeah.
like it produce, but that
Mhm.
perfect thing, no, no, and I
You know,
found that a profound, even though he was saying, because it's obvious that he was really good at it in his paintings, but he's saying, no, 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 I'd rather not paint that perfect picture. It was an amazing thing.
um, on a related note, I'm going to go back to Jimi Hendrix for just a second. I don't know if you've seen the interview where he was on Dick Cavett um, back in the day.
Yeah.
And Dick Cavett said something. I mean, he's sitting there, confident guitarist sitting there being interviewed. And Dick Cavett said, that a lot of people consider you the greatest guitarist that's ever lived. And I watched Jimi Hendrix turn into an embarrassed 5-year-old.
Hmm.
Like he'd just been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. That big grin popped up, and he's, oh, no, 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 no.
Hmm.
And he says, you don't think so? He says, oh, no, 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 no. He says, maybe the greatest guitarist in this chair. And
Yeah.
that was it. He would not, he ran away from that. And I don't know if that's symptomatic of the true greats. It's to kind of, it's not false deprecation. It's not false humility. It's just the inability to accept that they may be at that level.
According to Amadeus, the movie,
Mhm.
Beethoven's life,
Mozart.
Mozart's life,
Mhm.
he had quite the ego
Yeah.
in that um, in that docu movie.
Mhm.
Um, see, if we go by the pop culture showing of it,
Mhm.
because this is a man that we don't have film footage of,
Right.
um, but we have a movie that was recreating the impression of the time, and maybe
Sure.
there is writings that he was egoistic slightly or something, that or the other. But um, the point I'm making is that maybe it's not shared by all artists
Oh, no, no,
because
I wasn't implying that. But there are certain people that they get to a certain level in our collective consciousness, and you think of them as the greatest of whatever. Some of them are going to believe it, but some of them are just flat out not going to believe it.
yeah. Well, Jimi Hendrix wrote things on guitar
Mhm.
that had never been done before.
Right. He was the
Sim-
inventor for sure.
Simply put,
Mhm.
something like Little Wing, unheard of.
Yeah. Well,
Just
most of it. I mean, because I can remember growing up and hearing it for the first time. I had heard the name tossed around a little bit, but I hadn't heard a Jimi Hendrix song until my dad brought home the Woodstock album. And my first taste was his set on that album, Star Spangled Banner and Purple Haze, and then a blues jam kind of a thing at the end of that. That was my first taste of that. And I had never heard anything like that before in my life. It was like, and my dad was kind of playing it down. He says, "Oh, well, it's all just a bunch of distortions. I don't know that I would even call that real music, but it spoke to me." And it was like, "Yeah, this is mine. You've got yours. Now I've got mine, and this is mine."
yeah, yeah.
I was the same way when I heard Santana. I had never heard of Santana before. Of course, you got to remember this was 1970, maybe 71.
Yeah, they
I
had
don't
just came out of
remember.
the. Yeah, they had just basically.
It was soundtrack for the movie, and so I was 9, 10 years old, something like that, really just starting to think about the music that I'd been hearing. And to hear something like this, which was completely different. I mean, the week dad brought home that album, I went down and I got Santana's first album. I was madly in love with Santana's performance on the
But it
Woodstock
wasn't as
soundtrack.
good as the live track, was it?
Um, the version they did on the album was very similar to the version that's in the movie.
I've heard it,
That
and I don't
that
know.
song has been cut up so many different ways. It's the everything up to the drum solo is a little bit longer in the movie.
Yeah, but
By
there's a quality that's not shared on the album.
the the album, that is still my all-time favorite live performance by any group, anybody, anywhere.
Well, yeah, the da-na-na-na-na,
Do, do,
da-na-na-na-na.
do, 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 do. That's just it.
The problem is that sometimes you capture lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, but and Carlos has been riding it for 50 years now. So, I mean, he put the lid on that bottle
Well, but
and been riding it. But my point is that was my exposure to stuff that I had never heard before. It wasn't you didn't turn on AM top 40 drive time radio and hear Jimi Hendrix. You just didn't.
now what?
So when I got exposed to that, it's like, give me more of this. And I started expanding my horizons and I started looking for albums. And I got Purple Haze or Are You Experienced and a few other records. And just that's where it started from. But it was brand new.
I don't
Nobody
know.
heard anything like
I
that.
don't know that there's anything under the main blocks of musical genres that can take it to another level that it's already been taken. I don't know that that's true, but I feel that in the vast ocean of music across the 20th century,
Hmm.
um, I don't see them getting it better than Bob Marley in the reggae genre,
Hmm.
the rock genre. I don't see it. I mean, there's people that can rebrand as they go along tones from the past
Sure.
in unique ways, but the discovery, the landing
Yeah.
in America, the landing in the West Indies,
Hmm.
that can only be performed one. I mean, it can be performed a few
Exactly.
times.
And there are very few things that compare to that. There are very few things over my lifetime that I can remember anyway that I listened to or watched or saw something that I had never seen before that was just a jaw-dropping experience for me. As a 9, 10-year-old kid with headphones on, listening to Santana and listening to Jimi Hendrix on those albums. I'd never heard anything like that. And that stands out in my brain as one of the big events of my life. Watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. That's another one that stands out. You're going to think it's funny, but seeing the movie Star Wars, the first one, that's another one that stands out in my brain. Those opening scenes with the spaceships flying over the camera. After first they pan down onto that planet, then the spaceships fly. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. They all were the little models wobbling down on a pieces of string, or they were far away shots. There were no motion shots, there were no action shots, and it damn sure didn't look real. That looked real. And those were jaw dropping, holy crap moments that I can remember. And those three right there are the only ones that I can think of.
Yeah. In cinema, the most important one for me, there were many, but one that really changed a paradigm in my thinking was in 1991, I think it was, when I sat with my friends and watched Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked. I remember being shocked from the beginning of the movie all the way
Mm-hmm.
to the end of the movie. I remember sitting there looking at the film, and from the beginning that I sat down till the end, I had never experienced shock the way I had that day
Mm-hmm.
watching a movie. And the reason was that throughout the whole movie, I was continuously reminded, boldly in my face,
Mm-hmm.
it's screaming or artistry
Mm-hmm.
right out the screen, thought wise. Like, I didn't parse it out then.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like lay it out on a table and sketch out what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But reflecting on it, every moment of that film, the way it was written,
Mm-hmm.
filmed, the dialogue, the whole thing was a mental slingshot
Mm-hmm.
um, of creativity that left me. I actually got up after my friends got up,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, "Elo, let's go." And he says, "Dude, do you guys? Can you believe what we just experienced?" And they were like, "Yeah, come on, let's go, dude." And like
Yeah.
there was nothing to them. They were just. I was sitting there shocked, dude,
Mm-hmm.
of what I was seeing because I saw. I couldn't put it in concrete, but I saw something so new
Mm-hmm.
in the way it was done
Mm-hmm.
that today we don't even know how much of Quentin Tarantino. That's how important his work is. Has leached into or bled into all
Oh
other.
yeah. Oh yeah. And uh, there are so many examples of that. So many examples of that. I mean, certain things come along, and you hear this. It's a cliche. Oh well, this is the most important film to come out in in the history of cinema, or this is the most important album, or this is the most important band, or the most important television broadcast. You hear that thrown around a lot, but when you actually sit down and study it, most of them are okay. Yeah, they're good. Don't get me wrong, but no band has replaced the Beatles. That was a band that came along, the right people, the right time, the right combination, the right machine came together to let them do what they do. Music changed forever. Forever. I don't know that, even if you don't like the Beatles, I don't think you can deny that. There are certain films that have come along that have done the exact same thing for different reasons, be it a soundtrack, be it a performance by an actor. Some folks would argue Citizen Kane is that film. I don't know. I think there are a few that could qualify. Sometimes I think greatness is an elusive thing that I can't give any answers. All I can do is make arguments on why I think something was the greatest. So,
Alexander the Great, that's for
eh,
sure.
but now he's dead. So, you know,
Well,
yeah,
no,
but for sure.
but his
And
that's somewhere where great applies, in
mhm,
that reading the story, or I watched a full length like
mhm,
documentary of it. And they're giving the historical play by play.
mhm,
I didn't research further than that because it's a long
sure.
story, but um, it's an amazing journey.
Yeah. Well,
It's an
Peter the Great.
amazing journey.
Peter was there. He was great. Ivan wasn't. He wasn't too great.
You know why they all use those names?
Well, Ivan was the terrible. So, but
But you know all the leaders afterwards.
mhm,
Not all.
yeah,
Let's rephrase that. Many of the important leaders
mhm,
mentioned Alexander the Great,
yeah,
and many of the people visited the places that he visited, like world leaders,
mhm,
because he's like that iconic, even in the
mhm,
memories of people in centuries past.
yeah,
Um, so that says something about the guy,
yeah.
oh, the
But
things that he did.
to be honest, I was talking more or less in my lifetime. But yeah, yeah, there's no denying it.
Yeah, I kind of went to the extreme with that, but yeah, whatever you said that, and my mind just went in
Yeah.
that extreme area. But yeah, as far as music and this and that, it's, I guess, our personal. Just because someone says, "Oh,
Mhm,
this band is great,"
mhm.
um, at the end of the day, it's a matter of opinion. Now, if a
It
hundred,
is.
if 100 million Elvis fans or whatever the number was agree, then if and you disagree, then you're up against. If you're trying to put forth you saying
Mhm.
no, that he's not great, well, there's a
Well,
100 billion people that
and
say different. You know,
and that's what I mean. I can't give you an answer. Yes, Elvis was great. Was he the greatest at some things? Yes, but that doesn't mean Roy Orbison wasn't great too. See, when the argument comes down to who was the greatest, like you and I did an episode years back, one of our first few, where we were talking about Jimi Hendrix versus Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I don't see it as a versus kind of a thing, but I played the devil's advocate. I think those two both have a solid claim, and I won't pick one over another, and I won't make an argument to tell you why you shouldn't pick Jimmy or why you shouldn't pick Stevie. I can only make an argument to tell you why you should pick Jimmy or why you should pick Stevie, because I think they're both great. And I
right.
think when you if you really want to boil it down, if you want to get into guitarists and say who was the greatest to do it, I think there are about 8 that can that it may be 9 that can make that claim. And I refuse to put one over the other because there may be different genres, they may be different um, eras. You know, you cannot deny Django Reinhardt, but he's not even in the same discussion with somebody like Jimi Hendrix because they're totally different genres.
Yeah, and if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Some people don't frequent the French gypsy jazz movement of
Mhm.
yesteryear, and so that in their minds they don't even have a place to place them.
Exactly. They can't even put that there. So when you talk about greatness, and you could go into sports, you could talk about this. Who was the greatest quarterback ever? Well, I think there's like, 6, 7 people that have proved themselves enough to make that claim, you know, to be the greatest of all time. But I can't put one of them over the other because greatness is a subtle thing and it's
And there's moments,
transitory.
and it's transitory. Who's
Hmm.
that woodworker that's also an actor that's very famous?
Oh, Nick Offerman.
Okay, Nick Offerman. Um, so like I don't watch his. I don't know if he has a
Hmm.
woodworking channel or not. Like I don't pay attention, but I know that he's in the circles and stuff,
Hmm.
and he's a famous guy and stuff. He has this funny, and I'm just mentioning it because a lot of people like him and look up to him.
Hmm.
He's always there's one where he walks in with this girl called something Plaza.
Hmm.
Um, she's an actress,
Audrey Plaza. Aubrey
Audrey
Plaza.
Plaza,
Hmm.
and they walk into like this grocery store. I love it,
Hmm.
and like there's this guy with this like apron and whatnot, and he's standing there handing out like refined vegetarian
Hmm.
non animal product
Yeah.
like meat and stuff, and he said, sir, would you like to try this? And he walks up with Audrey Plaza, and he says, what's that? And he says, oh, it's a animal plant based blah 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 replicating meat or something, he says. And he says, okay, and he hands it to him. He looks at it and he throws it in the garbage. I'll have another. Have you seen it?
No, but I have seen clips of it, and that's right on, right in character.
Yeah, and so he hands him with the tongs another one, and he throws it in the trash. He says, another. Mark, and the guy says, sir, is there something wrong? I don't think I can give you another one. And then Audrey Plaza says, I'll have one, and he gives one to Audrey, and she looks, and she tosses it, and she and she looks at Offerman, and he looks at her, and they smile slightly, and that's the end of that. Dude, it's so hilarious.
Yeah,
And then the second one, what was that?
that's one of the clips that I've seen of him. Is he's sitting at a table. It's evidently an office meal or something like that. He's sitting at a table. They're having dinner, and he looks over and he goes, "My food eats your food."
Okay, well, this one's the one I'm going to tell you is just is the same thing. So he's walking through a big box store, Home Depot like place,
Hmm.
and maybe you've seen this one. And he's walking, and one of the employees is a
Hmm.
young guy walks by, and and Offerman is pushing his cart, and the young guy employee turns and says, "Sir, can I help you and assist you with something?" And he turns and just dead shot. He looks at him and says, "I know more than you." And he
Yeah.
turns and he keeps going. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I have seen that one. I know more than
Dude,
you do.
it's so hilarious, dude. It's so hilarious because
Yeah.
you can the scenario. You've seen people that come up willing to help,
Mhm.
and but that
That
you're
they
not gonna
have
get.
no clue. They have no clue what they're doing. You're usually over in lumber, and today you're working the electrical aisle. You don't know a switch from a breaker.
Yeah, yeah, you know it that they don't know.
Uh,
It's hilarious.
yeah,
I don't know
and
why I
I
brought that
always
up, but
get that guy.
those are great clips at
I'm gonna
least.
rant for just a second here. That's my problem with Home Depot. I don't care what day of the week I go there. I don't care what time of day I go there. The guy who is the guy in whatever department I am, he's on his day off, and somebody from socks is filling in for him today. You know, and I don't care if I go in to buy an appliance. This dude was working the paint aisle yesterday. You know,
Yeah.
if I go to buy lumber, this dude was on the electrical aisle yesterday. It just that's the only thing. That's my problem with Home Depot. Okay, rant over. Off my
Uh,
soapbox.
yeah. Um, let me tell you this. I
Mhm.
finally today put the battery in the car,
One
filled it with
small
water,
victory at a time.
filled it with water.
Hmm.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I went to the gas station on foot
Hmm.
with a huge tank,
Hmm.
put in a few bucks, walked it back,
Hmm.
filled it first, put in the battery, connected it, locked it, brought the hose, filled it,
Hmm.
capped it, grabbed my keys, turned it on, cranked, went off because it's been sitting there. So
Hmm.
I gave it some gas and cranked it.
Hmm.
It turned on.
Okay.
I got out. I looked under because it still has a leaking from that plug that we were talking about.
Yeah. Freeze plug. Yeah.
Or that's what I assumed. And I looked down and I didn't see any freaking dripping. None. None.
Okay.
And I was like, this is a predicament because I'm looking at this. I don't have the confidence to just willy nilly, I need
Yeah.
to have it. But the point is not that. The point is that I'm looking at it like, oh, wait a second. Because before it was just shooting out, man. Or not shoot, but it was spraying out,
Hmm.
which was noticeable. And
Hmm.
now I'm not noticing squat.
Check the radiator again. Maybe there wasn't enough water in it to where it was up to that level yet. Check the radiator again. Fill it up. I'll bet you it's low again.
Well, I went to the hose, but I will do.
Hmm.
But the story doesn't end there. Well, no, you would assume that
Hmm.
that channel would be full because it's the part of the block that the water would travel there.
Right, but it may not be up to that level yet. Is what I'm getting at. You
Oh,
don't know
where
how
the
much
water spills
you.
over?
Yeah, you don't know how much you lost. Is what I'm getting at. So because you can fill that up, your thermostat's closed. You can fill up the radiator. Some of it's going to flow back into the block. Not all of it will. I bet you if you squeeze the hose up at the top of the engine, there's air in it. There's no water in it. That's what I'm getting at because it hadn't been started in a long time and it was leaking water. So
Well, so I'll do that. But let me continue the story. It
go ahead.
wasn't leak, and
Okay.
I thought maybe sediment.
Hmm. It's possible, I guess.
Well, that's what I thought. That sediment started to push up on that thing, and
Hmm.
but at the
Plug the
same
hole.
time, sediment isn't glue,
No. And the minute water starts circulating through there, it's going to wash away.
right? So I should see, unless it's that you're saying. We will find out. But I turned it on and I
Hmm.
left it on,
Hmm.
and I looked at the gauge, and it wouldn't go up
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
temperature. So I took it for a little ride
Hmm.
and got back. I did turn on the AC, so there was water dripping from that,
Hmm.
and then I shut it off. But then I looked afterwards, and there was no water there. I'm not trying to convince myself that okay, like I know that because I saw the spraying out,
Yeah.
and so I know that I have to do. But the point is not that. The point is that um, after what 2 months or more, about two
Hmm.
months, I, I I I for the first time sat in the car and took it for a ride. And the reason I did that today was
Hmm.
because the other day I got sick and tired of it because I went to unbus to the
Hmm.
Walmart, got to it, did this whole circling of the building inside, buying stuff and stuff,
Oh.
and I put them in my bags
Hmm.
that I got from Walmart
Yeah.
so I can carry it around. Like I'm not using a
Sure.
shopping cart. I'm just using those totes as I'm walking around.
Yeah.
Because that way I can wiggle through people and not have to deal with like I'm parked
Yeah.
here, I gotta wait. And that way I get done with it because I want to get out of there.
Hmm.
And after all that, I come back to the register, the self-serve, and I start clicking things and putting and arranging it so I can prepare and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm halfway done, and a lady comes up to me and says, "Sir, you have to stop and this and that." And she said, "Did you put something in there and stuff that maybe didn't pass through because the machine and this and that?" And her customer service was so poor
Mm-hmm.
that that the way she framed everything little by little, I lost it.
Yeah.
I lost it. Like I always try to keep a certain. At that moment, I lost it so bad, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
because the insinuations in my mind, according to the way she was laying things out. Now, in retrospect, I could have been more calm and said, "Let's count everything one at a time." My voice kept going, and dude, because I will not touch a penny from some person or a thing or
Right.
nothing. I don't want anything. I don't want anything.
They don't know you. They don't know
No, no,
that.
no. I
And
know.
I get it.
I know they don't know me. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
the psychology of that. Obviously, they don't know me. I'm saying that my offense, my insult,
Mm-hmm.
was that I know me, and
Yeah.
it pissed me the hell off, and I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Reason out the door at that moment, and I
Yeah.
try to keep reason as much as possible. At that moment, I lost it to such a degree. Let's put it this way: by the end of my back and forth, there were two managers there, three employees. Um, Loss prevention
Mm-hmm.
was scanning the customers were. I formed because the insult was. I was so indignant.
Mm-hmm.
I formed a chaos all around me that echoed through Walmart that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and one little manager, I even told the little manager, "Oh, we got to count this." And he grabbed the bag to scan
Mm-hmm.
it. And I said, "Get your little grippy hands off of that." Like I went, "Sir, I'm the manager," and get another manager. And I just kept elevating because here's the thing: you proceed by correcting the issue and
Mm-hmm.
moving the hell out of the way, allowing the transact. All that matters
Mm-hmm.
is that this stupid turd of an item. Oh, I even said that. You said I got so pissed. I pulled out my wallet and I said, "Look, I've got money galore. Are you trying? What the hell are you people? You see all these?" And I pointed at all the items around me and loud. I said,
Mm-hmm.
"All these items are crap. What the hell is going? What the hell is wrong with you people?" Because it's true. All the stuff. Yes, we need them. We need the items, but the point is, it's all a bunch. Frankly, all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it, a bunch of crap. And you and in context, I was so pissed, and I'm getting pissed now just thinking about it. In context, you're creating a situation with crap items that just cost. Well, it's expensive still, but that's not the point. It's a drop in the bucket, and you're creating. Solve the problem, get the customer out, and get it over with. Don't create a scenario where your gab is enraging and one manager, a young lady, very cute as button, said, "Sir," and I looked at her and I had seen her before interact and she's helped me before in the past, and I looked at her in front of everybody. I said, "Oh no, you, I respect you because look, you have brains." And I mean that sincere. I said that in front of everybody, and like so that everybody could hear it. And it's true. You know what she did do?
Mm-hmm.
She scattered everybody and she started helping me with my and she says, "Sir, sorry," and started putting the stuff in my bags. "Let's help you out and stuff." A whole train wreck of people. Mind
Mm-hmm.
you, I could have held my tongue and held my emotions, but the set of words that were laced together by that incompetent person, and I was in a grumpy mood too, because remember, I'm traveling, even though
Yeah.
I'm okay with it, but in order for me to get a simple thing, I need to do all this,
Yeah.
and you're going to create another obstacle for me. and poor customers, and it just escalated in my. I just I blew like a freaking choo choo train, dude. And basically, I was scream. Last thing I'll say, I looked at her, the final manager. I said, "Listen, forgive me. I just can't control myself right now. I am so upset and insulted." And she said, "No, sir, forgive us." I said, "No, no, forgive me. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry." And I left. That's why today I got up and fixed the car.
That right there is an example of what I meant earlier when I said how you present it. That's happened to me where you scan something. What I did one time is I scanned it, badoop, it scanned, and I was getting ready to put it in a bag, and I noticed that something else in the bag I was putting in it had fallen over. So I kind of hovered above, I guess, above the scanning area too long and stood up whatever it was that fell over, and then I put it in the bag. Well, the camera above the self service detected that as another item going in the bag because I hesitated. I stopped and then did it. So it turned red and it said, "An associate will be with you soon." And the lady walked up and she said, "This thing is very sensitive." And she hit the little button, entered her number, and it showed that. She goes, "Yeah, you held it over the scanner and it saw it again, but it didn't scan." And I said, "Well, these things are kind of touchy." She goes, "This one especially." She cleared it. She looked, she saw the one thing, she saw it on the screen, and that was it. No accusations,
It's stupid.
completely understood. This one is particularly sensitive. It's got a track record of reading something that wasn't there.
Explain it to the customer. Be
Yeah,
decent about it. But
exactly. And
but
that's my entire point.
are
It's
we Inspector Clouseau now?
presentation. No,
It's presentation. Are we detectives of now over a turd of a freaking stupid item?
it was speculation on that first manager's part. And that, plus the way she wrapped it all up, she
And my
presented
and
with
my
she presented with a false accusation.
and my state at the time that
Right.
edged it over the thing.
That's the same problem I had with those documentaries. That's all I was getting at.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
That one and one that she put together and got purple, thank you, Steve, I'm going to use that, was the wrong color.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and out loud I said at the nice manager, but focusing it on, I said, some of your employees are nice. I'll give you that, but a whole lot of them seem to be very slow. Do they have some mental? What's going on here? I mean, I see the people here. There's a lady over there because I've had issues with other people, but minor. But I got so pissed that I just threw the whole kitchen sink at her. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" I mean, I see people at the registers, and this is how they process the products. Blip. I even stopped at that moment to say, "Blip." I mean, are people I went there. I went there, Mark. I went. I was so pissed,
Mhm.
so pissed, and I left. And then I got home and I said, "Nope, nope." Now in a situation like this, because I'm doing everything within. Sure, I shouldn't have blown up. I knew it immediately, but my emotions got the best of me, and I
Mhm.
haven't had that happen in so long. But I was sick of it, and so then I thought to myself, I gotta fix my freaking because that way I, I don't have to deal with if I don't like. But in this situation, I have to go do the do the thing and go because I'm stuck within the means that I'm using.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, you know what? And so that's why I did that. But
Yeah.
I blew up like nobody's business, Mark.
Pissed you off so bad you fixed your car. Or are working on it anyway.
I'm working on it, but
And Greg has to be the snow crusher. And his reputation has to stay the same.
yeah, actually, unbeknownst to a lot of you, yes, I did. Actually, for coffee, and we met up yesterday on Sunday.
Mhm.
and we're planning to do it again.
Mhm.
And I don't have footnotes for that on Wikipedia.
I'm glad you stopped because I was going to start finding it hard to keep a straight face.
Well, but see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. In your mind, just like the lady did, you're adding up the things, and you're assuming that this is.
No, I saw that look in your eye
Oh,
that said, I'm going to have fun with Greg. And you do another thing when you start to kind of
bullcrap.
embellish things, let's
Yeah,
say, you
yeah,
quite a bit because you're thinking on your feet.
yeah. Well. I do that all the time, anyhow. But uh, instead of saying something like, "Oh, Greg, well, shucks,"
Yeah,
and such,
it,
I went the other direction.
and feed him.
What's that?
Feed him.
Yeah, feeding
Feed
him,
the monster.
feeding.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, well, no, she was cute as a button,
Yeah.
to be sure. So we did have coffee.
Mhm.
I said, I opened the door of the bus for her. We got in.
You opened the door, not the
We, we,
driver.
we we had great. There was air conditioning, great scenic views,
Mhm.
and we stopped at a little cafe just this side of the border. Let me open the door for my dog.
Yeah, yank the other one. Man, we got to land the plane. So anyway, I'm going to go back to that channel, the Resurrectionists, where we started off this escapade. This is a channel that really needs to be checked out if you are into some of the weird, some of the goofy, um, the real life origins of the story of Snow White. Um, Rockabye Baby, the chilling truth revealed. The true story behind Little Red Riding Hood. Peter Pumpkin Eater
Had a wife, loved to beat her.
had a wife but couldn't keep her, put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well. There is a story behind that. But the way they present these, they, and this is what I like about it, they don't give you definitive answers. Almost all of this examination of these nursery rhymes, songs, and stories have three possible origin stories. And at the conclusion, they ask you, what do you think? They take the three most plausible theories behind the origin stories of these nursery rhymes. And then they present all three, and then they ask you what you think. And some of the discussions down in the comments are pretty good. Some of them are pretty fun. But it's an interesting channel to check out. Again, it's called The Resurrectionists. And I will post a link to it over on our Facebook page there, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. If you like that kind of stuff, it's a good one.
I don't want to revisit the recent past, but I just want to say this extra aside.
Mm-hmm.
Is frankly, I blew up so bad that I, after the fact, and even during, I knew this was not going to end well for
Mm-hmm.
myself in my conscience. But as I walked out the door, I felt guilty of exploding to the level that I did
Mm-hmm.
immediately, because I knew that if my better self would have prevailed, I would have
Handled it
taken it like
differently.
a champ, maybe said a few choice things, controlled, but the avalanche was there
Yeah.
because of the set of circumstances. And I later spoke with my aunt about it, and I
Mm-hmm.
explained, and she says, "Oh, I would have been upset as well. That's, you know, the customer service level, as she had mentioned, has become more and more poor And she gave me a few anecdotes, recent ones
Mhm.
that she's experienced, explaining that it's pretty ubiquitous across Dade County in itself, where service is kind of lacking and such. Um, and all people are stressed for different reasons or the same reasons, but I've I felt guilty due to exploding because I usually try to stick with the not the animalistic instincts, but man, it just goes to show that um, all it takes is the right set of circumstances, and you become the Hulk, not
Yeah,
Bruce Banner, but you become the Hulk, and I don't want to do that.
yeah.
Like I don't want to be that, and so I
Well,
have
it's not
to know.
like you have a track record of walking in there and flipping over gum racks and things like that and demanding this, that, or the other, you know. So
I'm the opposite
that's what I
of
mean.
taking a cent or anything from anywhere. I
Yeah,
don't want it. I don't care.
yeah,
If you're giving me a buck for some reason or another,
yeah.
I'll
Well,
take it begrudgingly. I'll say, well, no. Like, if I'm helping someone with the like I did, they said,
mhm.
here's 20 bucks for helping us charge the car. I said, no, sir, no, take it, no. At some point, he's saying no, take it, and I'm saying no. It's going to get into a fight. So I said, okay, well, thank you very much, but I'm like, I didn't do it
Yeah,
for
right.
you know
Yeah,
so I'm not interested in
mhm.
taking things that are not mine. I don't want it.
Yeah. Well, I don't
But
think
I know
anybody's
that.
doubting that.
But I know. Well, no, I'm just saying it out loud because I'm
Yeah.
so. I know that.
Mhm.
But like you said, they don't know me from Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
But
But then again, like we've said a couple of times before, it's all on presentation. I firmly believe, I firmly believe that you can call anybody the lowest form of life on the walking the face of the earth. If you know how to say it the right way, they'll smile and thank you for it. You know, there are ways that you can present something that is potentially a bad situation. There are ways of presenting it to where it's not a bad
no,
situation.
just solve the problem.
Yeah,
But in any
exactly.
but in any event, the point
Mhm,
is in this latter part is that I did feel that,
mhm,
and uh, like I made a note of it, but to get to that level of
mhm.
exploding verbally like that and just like because I mean I elevated and
You're
everything they said was
yeah.
like wrong in an offensive and stupid way,
Mhm,
in that just stupid just kept piling up on their faces, and I'm looking at them and say, well, this is just like it's like you're in a den full of freaking, well, they have no idea, they're just there. And it's like, well, I made a note that I'm just gonna have to take it next time, and sort of like and just avoid that whole thing and say, okay, yeah, oh, of course, you do
fix
what
it.
you have to do. You do
Mhm.
have to like avoid it. But wow,
Mhm.
it's been so long that I exploded like that, like in true anger,
Well,
like indignant just anger. I was like, whoa, yeah, yeah,
well, I mean, we all have bad days and we all have bad moments.
boy,
It
boy, oh
happens.
boy, boy, oh boy. Like I was like,
Well, you can only take so much. A person can only take so much. You can only get slapped upside the head so many times before you put your hand up to block the next one, you know? And
let me,
sometimes that's what it looks like when people say no.
yeah, yeah. Uh, just one final one, bus
Yeah.
related. And
Mhm,
an older gentleman, a few weeks back, our bus stopped
mhm,
at this intersection at the little seating thing
mhm.
to pick up more people.
Yeah.
The bus driver got up and just stretched a little bit and whatnot,
Mhm,
and the door was open, and there was a guy that supposedly was going to come, and the bus driver said in Spanish, he said, Come on, old man, we're not here forever. And the old man blew up on him.
Mm-hmm.
I am an elder gentleman. You can't talk to me like that. You're a public employee. How dare you? He says, sir, you've been standing around. You saw the bus here. Do you want to get on or not? I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to take the other bus. Get out of here, he said to the guy. But he blew up and he's an older gentleman. Now, here's the thing. The bus driver said it in a tone that was slightly half joking, friendly, like, come on, old man, we don't got much, we got to get out of here. But the older gentleman wasn't playing games.
Yeah.
And in that um mis uh
Miscommunication. Yeah.
miscommunication of where their temperaments were at, it created the explosion. And then when we kept going,
Mm-hmm.
the bus driver, was a little bit like nervous about it. And there were two gentlemen that were older gentlemen sitting there, and me. The two gentlemen said, that's a sour old grape, you know, and whatever. He's got such an attitude and this and that. And since we're there, I turned around and I said, well, sir, on the other hand, I shouldn't have chimed in, but because the faces they looked at, because I contradicted everything they said right
Mm-hmm.
there and then. I said, well, on the other, not contradict, I give an alternate possibility. People don't like that. A lot of people don't, and so they don't. And so I turned and I said, well, sir, on the other hand, he's an older gentleman, and frankly, maybe he just doesn't. He doesn't want it. I'm sure. I don't know, but I'm sure that when I'm that age, and they're closer to that age than I was by a
Yeah.
lot, and I'm sure when I'm that age, that chances are I won't want people, jokingly or not, messing with me. Maybe so, maybe not, but we can't. We don't know. And they didn't like that because it was contradicting their thing. And the bus driver was like, "But I didn't really do anything. I really did." It was a moment
Yeah.
of miscommunication that occurred.
Yeah, but still, there's still some things you just don't say. I wouldn't call somebody older than me an old man.
You don't say that because it's not a nice thing to
Yeah,
say.
it's not a nice thing to say.
Even if you're
So,
joking,
yeah.
come on,
And,
Grandpa,
well,
something like that.
and you never know. I mean, it may have been a case where that guy, the older guy that blew up,
Yeah,
maybe that was the straw that broke his back too. You
that's
don't know
true.
what was happening from the moment he got up.
In his life,
Yeah,
during that day.
exactly. That may have been just the one that caused him to blow up.
Yeah, it's better not to mess with people.
Yeah, just treat people the way you'd like to be treated, man. Be nice to one another.
Yeah, it just miscommunication is a big thing. I got to
Mhm.
give you one more thing, just one more thing.
Okay,
There's a
then we got to
lady that.
land it.
What's that?
I said, okay, then we got to land it.
Then we'll end. There's a lady that walks her dog,
Hmm.
and I've noticed various times across the years,
Hmm.
she always stops by and I'll say hi and we'll say little chit chat and she'll keep going.
Hmm.
And she is always all sorts of worry about my dog
Hmm.
because she hasn't said it out loud, but apparently I'm a guy.
Hmm.
And guys don't know the first thing about taking care of little, nor chances are have the sentiment inside them that women have. That's the impression that I get from her, that men are all brutes, and women are like really the flourishing this and that. I'm not taking away from women, but I'm taking
Hmm.
away from the concept of dividing people in those terms.
Yeah.
One time Vigo was in the back, and
Hmm.
by the way, he's doing about 90% better,
Hmm.
roughly.
Hmm.
He's much more active now and
Hmm.
awake and much better. Um, he was in the back and he was barking,
Hmm.
but the beagles, let's see, have a unique howl.
Hmm.
It's like a baying.
Hmm.
It's kind of like it sounds complaining, like
Hmm.
the kind. And she's like, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with the dog? And I didn't even have time to say. I'm looking at her, and I could tell that. So I'm listening to my dog baying at the same time she is, and we're talking. She's seeing me not moving about,
Hmm.
like something
Because
wrong
you know your dog.
because I know my dog, but she's looking at me shocked
Hmm.
and like, "Where's your dog? What's going on?" And I'm looking at her and I'm about to explain, but here comes Vigo walking, and
Yeah,
she goes, "Oh, but there's
that's his
no
bark. Yeah,
the idea is in her brain. She hasn't said it, but
yeah.
all the signals point to something not nice going on
Hmm.
because men are incapable of nurturing.
Well, yeah, of course.
And
Yeah.
yes, we are rough around the edges, obviously,
We're
but
well, no, we're all brutes, and then we walk around. When nobody's looking, we're walking like gorillas.
yeah, it's just
And
too
we
much.
can't take care of anything. We just want to hit it with a hammer, and that solves all our problems.
Yeah, it's just too much, dude. It's too much. And so you see stuff like that, and it's like, oh, give me
Well,
a break.
again, we're talking about the desocialization
Yeah.
that we're all going through. You
Well,
know,
she is. If that's indeed her thought, and that's my impression of it, at least, I am quite the hermit on the scale of hermit. So,
well,
but not cave like, but close. But
but
it's still,
all of this that we've talked about in the last 10-15 minutes to me are symptoms. They're examples of those symptoms of people don't know how to deal with people anymore.
yeah,
You know, we've spent so much time, effort, and energy coming up with new ways to not have to talk to another human being. You see it on the roads. There's more road rage because somebody perceives that somebody
yeah,
did them a slight out on the highway. You see it when they're in crappy customer service. People don't know how to talk with other people, you know,
yeah.
how to say please and thank you and yes, sir, no, ma'am, whatever, you know,
It
it
adds up
just,
little by little.
it does little by little. And when you don't know, you get frustrated. And when you get frustrated, you lash out. And it's becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah,
You know, it's, I mean, it, I'm not blaming any of those situations. I just see them as further examples of the whole thing. I won't call it the breakdown of society, but it's the decivilization of society. We've spent so much time, effort, and energy trying not to interact with one another. We don't know how to do it anymore,
yeah.
or we
And there's
just
lots
don't
of
want
pressure.
to do it anymore.
There's a lot of pressures too in
Hmm.
current life and stuff. It's not like
Hmm.
it's unpressurized necessarily,
Right.
but long story
But,
short, I regret exploding the way I did. But honestly, I'd like to say I would have had control, but at that moment, I just not that
well,
I would have been violent, but I was verbally,
sometimes we don't have control. I mean,
yeah,
that's part of being a human being.
yeah.
All right.
Um, all right, all right. So we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time here on the YouTube channel, which is called Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We have a Facebook page by the same name as well as a website, and we're sponsored by.
Man, you went through that so fast. I didn't have time to click through all the little goodies and then take down our scrolling marquee. Sponsored by Steve over at Harneal Media. You need a website. You want a website. You don't know it yet, but you do. Trust me on this. The only place you want to go is Harneal Media. There's a link to Harneal Media and everything on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. Number one reason is it gives you performance, not excuses. He's not going to try to convince you how to live without something that you really, really want. Do yourself a favor, go over, click that link to harnealmedia.com, hit that contact us link, and send Steve a message. Tell him what you're thinking about, tell him what you'd like. You want a merch provider, you want to design merch and have a print on demand company handle it, he can hook you up. You want to create an e-commerce site, you want a web store, he can hook you up. You want a blog, he can hook you up. Just let him know what you want. Very, very competitively priced, and you won't find better service because when you deal with Harneal Media, you deal with Steve. 100% of the time. So do yourself a favor, get over there, Harneal Media, that's HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot podcast.com.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Be safe, enjoy yourselves this week, and we'll be back on Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. In the meantime, do the things you love, and hey, you might blow up, you might not. I know
Pet,
I did this past week. I don't recommend it,
pet the dog.
and yeah. So and do good things in love, and we hope to see you here next time. See ya.
Peace. 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 Peace.